There are multiple positive effects, and these positive effects are cumulative effects. They're just not intermittent effects, they are very cumulative in nature. So, in my experience as a teacher, as an educator, or as a scientist, I have come to understand over the long period of my experience that without music, the essentials of cognitive development are impaired. And there are a number of studies that have studied this phenomenon, and we all know that we can seek these papers and we can read the scientific evidence that is available out there. Now, there are different kinds of styles of music and its effect on children, and I would like to list just a few that have been vastly extensively studied. For example, we have what is known as the receptive music learning experience or the intentional music listening experience, sharing music, which is when you go to a recorded concert or you go to a live concert, a group of people sit together and share a piece of music. You have solo or group instrument sharing, listening kind of a music, group singing, music and movement dance, lyrics and rapping, songwriting, composition, improvisation. So these are all the different categories in which children, they encounter music in their day-to-day lives, in their formative years, in school, out of school, in the house, and so on and so forth. And so hence we can see that when these are the different kinds of vast criteria that are available for children to come in close contact with music and its effects on the subconscious mind, therefore these different styles, different genres definitely have different kinds of effects, which we will see as we go down further with the different kinds of questions that are lined up for me. Of course, there are multiple different kinds of effects on children and adolescents. For example, let's revisit the different criteria that I had mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. Now, in case of receptive music listening, we see that there is a physiological arousal of mood and mood development and betterment of mood in children in general. Also, in case of intentional music listening. Now, receptive music listening and intentional music listening have a similar tone of experience, but they have a slight overlap. Receptive is in the sense where the listener is not directly participating in this kind of a music experience, whereas in an intentional music listening, you are a part of either the performance or the active or you're actively taking part in listening to this music. There is also physiological arousal that you see in mood development in case of instrumental music playing. And so culturally, I think all the different kinds of civilizations, they have a strong footing in the need to develop an art on one end and an educational pursuit on the other end. And so they say that it's the left brain and the right brain development. And so in order to develop your analytical skills, it is suggested scientifically also and culturally that we should pick up an instrument and play an instrument or learn anything related to music. Now, the second kind of effects, positive effects, is emotion or mood. Our mood changes on all these different kinds of experiences of music. In case of receptive music listening, intentional music listening, especially a shared music experience, instrumental music, when you're sitting in a huge hall of different kinds of excellent performers, the shared experience of instrumental music playing, and sometimes when there is a band that is playing and there is group singing involved, it becomes even more elevated of an experience. As the shared experiences, it's the same kind of music that we also hear when you're sitting in a church and listening to a choir. our emotional development also happens in case of lyrics, for example, rapping, for example. And so these are the different effects that they have in these two different categories. But when we come to cognitive memory, right, memory development, cognitive skills, analytical skills, um, ed- technicalities of performing well and being skilled at school, for example, in case of children, uh, also is developed, especially with intentional music listening and instrumental music playing. Now, the next is the self esteem or achievement. Music gives children a sense of achievement. And I think for the most part, every child, every kid is trying to understand how the world is functioning and find their place in this world, and they're looking for validation. For the most part of the time, they're trying to imitate someone and try to be them, and they have some idealistic goals in mind, and they pursue these dreams. And that's where they undergo different kinds of hormonal changes, biologically speaking, and that in turn affects the cognitive development, especially memory. And music aids, and the three different kinds of experiences that have been found to be most beneficial is instrumental music playing in cognitive development, group singing, and that's why having a opportunity to be a part of a community that does group singing is beneficial for cognitive development. The last is singing. You can be rapping, or you can be just, narrating the verses of the song, and that will be a great effect as well. The next effect that you have is physical activation. The biological elements, the metabolical rate, the BMR, the blood pressure. Biologically, children get very pumped when, for example, there is a Disney movie, or they hear the two words Harry Potter, for example, or ice cream, or any such thing. Now, when we go to a restaurant, or when we go to a hotel, or we go to an ice cream parlor, we go to any place, a cafe, we cannot imagine a life without music. And so, a sense of physical activation that gives us the bounce in our feet, so to step, bounce in our step, is very much done by music. And children who are associated with a background of music or an interest of family that encourages children to be taken to plays or to theater or to a animation movie, for example. And so a physical activation happens in all the different kinds of listening, as we have been discussing. The last but not the least is the social connection, and that is the most important connection. A child can be a Beethoven in his own well, but if he is not having an audience, a community to experience that shared experience, then it's futile. I could be sitting in my room, and then I could be playing a piece of music that nobody could have heard. Sure, it will give me these individualistic values, benefits that I'm seeking, or they are just a byproduct of listening to music or being musical in nature. But the community, the social relationships, psychosocial relationships is very crucial, and that social connection comes definitely by taking up music in their lives. The last is identity. I think that sums up the entire picture. If the child does not find identity in the social system, then he has an identity crisis, as we say. And so, identity um, also is an experience that is a byproduct of music and movement and dance. And so, if we are able to integrate these three different important milestones in a child's developmental growth curve, then we are definitely exposing children to opportunities that will allow them to grow unconsciously or subconsciously, so to speak, without putting in much effort.